What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian.
Hope you all had a really awesome Halloween. Hope you all got some. Or if you didn't, hope you at least had fun. Probably didn't, though.
Yeah, if you got some, I hope it was really scary and spooky. Yeah. spooky Halloween sex is the best, surely.
I bet all the post-Halloween STD testing's pretty scary.
Spooky. Syphilis.
So spooky. But speaking of spooky, we went to the most straight fin ever.
Yeah.
A wedding.
Yeah, a gay wedding of our...
today.
Our dear friends Vincent and Norman, who are avid listeners of Twink Revolution. Yeah. They got married today. And it was beautiful.
It was beautiful. It was a nice day.
Yeah, unironically. I have nothing ironic or snarky to say. It was really beautiful. Yeah. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah. But speaking of celebrations, not all celebrations are as beautiful, and one is the gender reveal party.
Yeah, this is a thing now, apparently. And I've seen this sort of genre blooming across the internet for a while, right? This you're having a baby, you're sort of heavily pregnant person standing around with a series of loved ones, and you then do something extravagant to denote the sex of the baby to the crowd. I saw somebody feeding like a watermelon stuffed with pink gelatin or some shit to a hippo.
It was a hippo. I've seen an alligator one.
Yeah, that was pretty scary.
But recent news this last week, the first person died from a gender reveal party, and I just think personally that's the saddest way to die. Like, oh, how did you die? Oh, I died from a shrapnel piece flying from an explosive gender reveal party bomb.
Yeah, so they as I understand, they basically accidentally constructed a pipe bomb filled with like colorful smoke materials.
Yep.
And did we find out what gender the baby was?
I don't think so, but
no. People were busy screaming and calling paramedics because it killed the grandmother, I believe, of the soon-to-be genderless child.
Just sad. But I'm just like, but how did they find this format? They were like, oh, honey, I went to this new, like, awesome bookstore, and it's called the Anarchist Cookbook, and there's a fin that looks like a great gender reveal party, like, explosion. Like, I assume that's what happened.
It's, we will finally reveal the gender of Abby Hoffman. People are constantly misgendering him. So I will not be holding a gender reveal party.
No, it's a very straight person
not be attending one either, I think.
And even the alleged creator is kind of like, yeah, this was a bad idea. She just kind of saw how it's gone downhill and kind of really feeds into, like, this idea of, like, gender being important about a baby. Like, a baby doesn't give a shit if it has a, like it doesn't care.
Well, it's certainly amping up the tendency, right? Some people do is they find out what the gender of their child is through whatever medical marvels that occur. Pregnancy is not really one of my areas of expertise.
No.
But to the extent that, they find out the gender of the baby, and then they might keep it to themselves. Or sometimes they don't want to know themselves, right? And that's all fine, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Surprises are fun sometimes, but building a pipe bomb and killing one of your relatives does seem a slightly extreme version of that.
I mean, it's the only way you can really accelerate to, like, beat the last person who did an awesome video on it. Like, oh, you wrestled an alligator to figure out maybe it's blue or pink? Well, my explosive device killed my grandmother, so who's the real winner?
and so the kind of opposite end of the spectrum to this, right, is the trend of babies.
Yeah, so it's basically this alleged growing trend. I don't know how frequent it is, but some bourgeois, like suburban white people most likely have been like, oh, we need to get rid of the idea of gender completely for babies and children. So they're babies. They won't refer to them as a boy or a girl. They're just they and them.
Right, and I don't think I disagree in principle, right, with the idea that you might choose to do this, but these children will still come in contact with a world that is does not think the same way.
Yeah, no, it's going to be confusing. Plus, like if you want to raise your child without like gendered expectations of like what it means to be a man or woman, like that's totally fine. But I think the way it's been treated as eliminating all things that are viewed as gendered is kind of just like problematic in itself. You're kind of feeding into this binary narrative of like trucks are for boys and dolls are for girls. Like there was this Vice video, and Vice is garbage, like I hate them, but they did like an expose of like Sweden, I believe, and this growing trend of like non-binary language and like raising your children as babies. And there's a school and they just won't have anything, like instead of, there was no dolls allowed, they only allow like animals because those are non-binary. And
it's true, animals have no gender either.
Yeah, there's no trucks, and like basically this won't even reference any of thing about gender, which I think is leading children down the wrong path.
It's certainly a fairly sort of radical experiment with children, which, you know, maybe we should be a little suspicious of, but specifically it does feel like it's in reaction to a dominant culture and therefore is reactionary in the true sense.
Yes.
Like it is not it's not like a sort of like, hey, we're going to try and remove our influence here. We're going to try and like reduce the influence we have in terms of like gendered expectations we place on children and things, which cool. Like that's a project, not one I'm personally going to invest a lot of time in, but like fine. If the, you know, parents are bored sometimes. And you got to do something, I guess. But I would be interested to find out, and maybe, you know, if for non-binary listeners of ours, like, you know, shout out. Yeah. Would you have wanted to be raised in that way, and would it have changed your experience? Because I don't know, you know, maybe we all live in a prison we don't realize, but I'm I don't know, it feels so impossibly upper middle class and sort of bored suburban housewife kind of shit. So
I agree. I mean, I think the ability to fully express yourself, especially breaking through like a gender binary, which is like a legitimate thing, is a very upper middle class, like bourgeois, like privilege. Like it's not working class people that get the benefits to explore their gender expression stuff. For many people, it's the death sentence. For most of them, it's like, oh, like I think ContraPoints makes a good example.
She's canceled these days.
Female YouTuber, how like she's like, oh, as a more well-off like white trans woman, I don't have to really deal with much compared to like people who are of lower class, like a lower economic standing and usually a different race.
I think the way in which people approach gender and sex and sexuality and all of these things, right, is so much, you know, it is a product of your upbringing, but it's not totally clear, right, whether bleeding the concept of gender out of a child's upbringing is going to have the desired effect of making them more conversant with the actual genuine structural problems that exist of gender. I do wonder, like, in the same way that woke male feminists right, are, you know, 100% of them are rapists. So like, and I'm not suggesting this is necessarily of a kind here, but you do sort of wonder, like, by coding or wrapping the actual structural problems that exist in a kind of personalizing thing of like, well, this child has no gender, therefore they are free of the structural exploitation of gender or the structural power imbalances of gender or the structural violence of gender. It's like, no, they're not, because they still live in a society, as the Joker has told us.
And I think another concern is, from hearing some of the stories of like families that have done it and seen the children, is in some cases it kind of comes across, maybe not intentionally, but it comes across as like the parents are trying so hard to prevent their child from falling into a gendered binary. They're kind of forcing their child to like do things that break the gender rule. Like I think the Swedish video from Vice, what the younger child really seemed to more lean towards like not wearing dresses, and the parents seem to kind of push them into that as like more appropriate role.
In terms of if let's say you were not doing the they be upbringing, I would think you were a shitty parent if you had a child who was, say, assigned female at birth, and you were forcing them over their objections to wear dresses. I think that would probably make you a shitty parent.
Yeah,
like if the child really doesn't want to wear a dress, then don't make them wear a dress. like
I think the proper way to deal with it is just like let your child do what they want. If they throw at the store and like, oh, I want the Barbie instead of the truck, or if they want both, like, okay, yeah, both.
Don't buy them anything.
Yeah.
Let them suffer and give them a Karl Marx doll, like a good parent.
Yeah, but I feel like a lot of just like very pressured on the child to like not do one or the other. And that's just, I feel like that's just as problematic as forcing a binary on a child.
Totally, it is putting them into a different box with a different label on it. But it is specifically like there are a range of behaviors that I'm going to police here, and they're the behaviors that I, as a parent of a certain, sort of hippy dippy persuasion, recognize as gendered behaviors. So like, yeah, you're just policing your child's behavior in a different shitty way, and causing probably all of the same neuroses and damage that it causes to do anything else, like preventing boys from playing with dolls or whatever. The damage that causes is exactly the same.
And I'd be interested to see how these children grow up. Like, are they going to be, when they have like a partner, so I'm like, oh, and here's my baby pictures, and everyone else be like, what the fuck is a baby picture? Like, and I'm like, oh, it's where I was raised with no gender expectations at all.
Right. And to the extent that I don't think, and I might be on very uncertain ground here, but I'm going to doubt that a lot of them maintain it into adulthood.
No, I don't think they probably do.
I suspect they, just by virtue of the fact that they will find themselves living in a society that values certain gender signifiers for purposes of sex and dating and so many facets of our life, right, are gendered. I'm going to guess most people go and find out they end up reinforcing some kind of gender binary at some point in their lives. And that's like to the same extent that children who were, say, are intersex, who were essentially the victims of some wacky hypotheses about, like, well, actually we can, we can take a scalpel and we can fix, quote unquote, their genitals, and then we'll raise them, say female, and then we see huge numbers of mental health issues resulting from that later, including suicide and self-abuse and all sorts of incredibly destructive behaviors, just as a result of somebody essentially saying, like, I can, my hypothesis about sex and gender can be brought into the world, and I'm going to test it on a child. I'm not a big fan, personally.
No. Yeah, but I guess kind of going off of the whole, like, reaffirming gendered culture, there was 2 gay men who recently went to some, like, frat party at University of Memphis, and apparently they were, like, harassed by, like, the frat brothers for, like, being gay and called, like, stupid faggots and stuff like that.
Wait, no, I've seen this video on Pornhub.
Yeah. Fraternity X.
Yeah, okay. We have footage of this specific encounter, I think.
Yes.
This is not the same one.
No, it's not. No, this is...
this really happened.
Yeah,
okay.
this really happened. And
I was getting wistful and distracted for a second.
And some gay guy wrote an article kind of talking about the problems of fraternity culture and homophobia. And
well, he was a gay academic, right?
Yeah.
At, like, NYU or something.
Some shitty school like that.
Some shitty school like NYU.
Yeah, never
fuck
heard
you,
of
NYU.
it. And I thought it was really interesting. I mean, you know this. I was in a fraternity when I was in college for part of the time.
Bro, do I ever know
Yeah,
it.
so bro. I did it for like a year and a half, and then I kind of just like dropped out because...
How's the hazing?
We didn't really have any.
Well, then was it really a fraternity?
No, I honestly, it was more just like a volunteer club because, for one, my school was like 80% female, so like most people couldn't join a frat anyways, and also like...
I bet the sorority hazing was amazing though.
I don't know. I'm not in a sorority, but the sororities were like pretty on point. But our school didn't allow like houses or anything either, so like it's basically a volunteer club with like exclusiveness. but they were also like local ones, the two initial ones. So they didn't have like a giant national chapter. Like we didn't have like those mega mansions and like, I don't know, the big schools.
Well,
like,
that's I mean, the cliches I know about frats. I mean, fraternities are not a thing outside the U.S. as far as I can tell. I went to different universities in New Zealand and in Denmark, and there's just not even a comparable idea.
Yeah.
But it also is so associated with money to me. Like it's we us starving students living off instant noodles and scraping by in whatever kind of dorms and student housing we could get. Definitely just never dreamed of the idea that you would have this sort of party mansion.
Yeah.
And with all the sexual assaults and all that just sort of didn't fly. I didn't think it ever entered my mind except from like American movies and things. So it sounds like your fraternity experience was not like the movies.
No, but I know plenty of people at other schools where it was. I mean, our dues were like $30 a semester when like other schools with like hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per semester to like be part of this exclusive club. So mine didn't feel as like classist or like bourgeois. I mean, it was extremely white, and like it kind of did have like that like
Wisconsin. It's kind of extremely white anyway.
I mean, Milwaukee it's pretty diverse, but my school is mostly white anyway. So yeah, it didn't feel like a regular frat. I think it's like I went to join make friends. So I was like, I can do this without that, and also I was like, too much work. Like
I always find it fascinating when I meet people who are, say, well into their post-college life, like into their 30s or 40s, who are still all like, yes, well, I was a Kappa back in the day. I'm like, well, burning crosses and, the old fraternity anthems of, use the N-word a lot or something. It's just baffling to me.
Yeah.
It's not a cultural, like a culture that translates well. And, I mean, to me, so much of that sort of, it feels like cosplay in so many ways, right? I mean, I'm sure there's like a very small number of secret societies and shithead kind of skull and bones type things that were like a few East Coast schools that were established in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Have continued, and I'm sure that absolutely ghastly power brokering goes on there, but I feel like for so many newer schools, they're trying to do this like.
Yeah,
they're trying to recreate that effect, but all they end up doing is creating a particularly sort of toxic set of like put a bunch of hormonal teenage boys together with no real authority and a set of expectations around like what is acceptable behavior.
Yeah,
I can't imagine why you'd have a bunch of abuse and assault and homophobia and all these things.
I mean, it's basically a cult. Like even like the ones that aren't like the stereotype, like it fits the definition. It's an exclusive club where you have to prove yourself to join, and you have a bunch of like hidden rituals and like chants,
jaunty robes.
Like we did I'm not gonna like talk about it because I'm not a dick, but like we did like a chant thing in the beginning of like every meeting, so like it's weird, like but also you would think like the stereotype is like, oh, frat culture, like all these extremely attractive men. I didn't really find it to be true. Even at the bigger schools, I think it's a very select few.
So Twink Revolution's rate your frat segment.
I did watch like this like MTV Cribs kind of show, but it was like not MTV. It was like the best frats in the U.S. and there was a lot of attractive men, but also they're all getting the guillotine. Like they had their own like, for one, their building was like a mansion, and it had like an AstroTurf like yard and a bunch of like Porsches and like Jesus. Fancy cars just for like anyone in the fraternity to use.
That's insane.
And
I mean, just think about like every time anybody has a discussion about like we can't afford X, where X is any universally provisioned basic need of like food, heating, shelter, housing, whatever. I like to remind people these things exist, and I find new ones every day.
And at the bigger schools, it's definitely a class based system, like especially when you go to like the South or like the East Coast or even Berkeley probably. It's very much like legacy ridden. It's kind of like the Skull and Bones, like it's this long, deep historical thing, and there's still like lots of racism and stuff like that in these cultures, which despite 2019 being different, it never really moved forward at all because
traditions. You can have black and brown members as long as they perpetuate all the same class signifiers correctly, right? But everyone wants to fuck these people, right? All the gays love frats.
I mean, the genre of like frat bro like porn is like its own thing. Like it's very large.
It's somebody who will beat you up after sex is sort of like the general image that's being portrayed there, right?
I mean, the whole story of like these two guys getting like surrounded by a bunch of frat guys, calling them like faggots and shit. Like that's what a lot of frat porn is. Like
a lot of people pay a lot of money for that.
Yeah, that's like a fetish child. You will not say like what happened to these guys was bad. But
I condemn it.
I think it's kind of like the phenomenon of like a lot of like women having like rape fantasies. I think it's very similar in this vein, like this hyper masculine men kind of like exploiting and like abusing you, because I think if you kind of control that like ideal in like a manner, it doesn't seem as like scary in a sense. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but
well, I mean, it certainly is. If they were nice people, the sexual fetishization of it wouldn't work.
Yeah,
it precisely hinges on the fact that these are kind of shitty hypermasculine bros, right? Who do not respect you as a human.
Yeah.
And I mean, to the extent that there's plenty of context in terms of like why people might find that attractive and that kind of power dynamic attractive in certain contexts. It is weird that like this is considered a vital part of American college, when as far as I can tell, that's kind of all it is. There's not a lot else going on there.
No, it's just like drinking beer and like
mistreating women.
Yeah, mistreating women and saying like racist chants and
being ungallant.
Yeah.
What's that something to aspire to? I think.
I mean, I think even in mine, it was still like there's a very like masculine energy around the fraternity. And I mean, I was like the first openly gay person to join a fraternity ever.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was only around for like, I think...
I'm not a psychologist either, but the gears are turning. No,
my fraternity was not very attractive to me in general. But I guess it also talked about an article like toxic masculinity, and he basically said, I hope to see the day of the end of the macho frat guy and the closeted gay guy. And I think his viewpoint's a little dated. I mean, there's not very many closeted people in college anymore. Like, it's probably still a thing, but it's much more minimal than it used to be. But also, I think it's kind of like a Libby take to like focus on like we must eliminate just macho masculinity, because I'm like, what is that, what purpose does that do? Like, what does masculinity mean to you? And that says a lot about what you want to get rid of, because like sorority are probably more cruel mentally and physically than fraternities. Fraternities are like, drink this beer and like to like rough you up a little bit, but like sororities are like that's like some Gitmo shit right there. Like, girls are far crueler mentally than guys are, because girls have a much stronger legacy of wanting to belong, while guys have the veneer of like, oh, I'm an independent masked bro, like I can kind of get away with more. But girls, it's like a lot worse. Where's the toxic femininity argument about this? That's
we can solve this. We need to have fraternities and sororities consisting only of babies.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a like there is actually a solution, right? And it turns out that if access to college is not a class signifier anymore, so you have some sort of universal access to college education. I think so much of why, particularly like public schools, still perpetuate this specific culture, right, is that it's a way of still holding yourself apart.
Yeah.
It's a signifier of a certain kind of affluence or privilege. I mean, in the true economic sense.
Yeah.
And so that's fine. We can just abolish them. This is an era of this is a product of a bygone era, and we should do away with it.
Yeah. I mean, there is sororities now.
Sororities?
So it's
sorry, your accent's not gonna.
They're basically hybrid. So instead of discriminating against either girls or guys, now it's anyone can join it.
Oh, okay. It's
yeah. So it's still exclusive organizations.
Mixed gender.
Yeah.
Well.
So I mean,
that sounds fucking terrible.
No,
I mean, there's no category for that on Pornhub, certainly. So.
I'd say just get rid of them and lower the drinking age to 18, and then no one will give a shit anymore. Like, fraternity culture probably has grown a lot more because of the drinking age.
I would believe that.
And also, like, former fraternity members tend to be more well off. Like, if you look at, like, people in, like, the capitalist class, most of them are, like, in Greek life in college.
Sure, it's the leisure time of the young, idle, rich, and the future ruling class.
So
right?
they're the
inheritors
ones,
of the ruling class.
They're the ones who will donate to colleges, so they have to pay good graces to them.
So if you are doing some underage drinking, as I like to do, facilitate, there's only one way to really enjoy your beautiful bottle of Bordeaux, and that's with a side of foie gras.
Oh, yeah.
But I can't in New York anymore, apparently.
Well, it actually isn't enacted until 3 years from now.
Oh, thank God. I've got another 3 years of just clogging my arteries with foie gras.
Like all good reforms, we just wait until, 5-10 years until we're going to actually enact anything.
Yes, make sure that it exceeds the term of the current legislature, so that they will not be held accountable for any changes enacted. It's great.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren's 10-year horizon for the implementation of Medicare for all or whatever is similar idea.
No, the bill passed because it wasn't just foie gras. It was like a larger animal welfare law in New York City. So it included more restrictions on horse carriages and the bird trade for pet birds and shit like that. And lots of rich people on Twitter were pissed because they're like,
yes, I mean my rich guy alt actually I've been tweeting nonstop about the foie gras ban in California as well, which passed 2 years ago.
That's been longer.
Well, I thought so. California banned it first by an act of the legislature. Then the California courts overturned it, and then it was reinstated by the Court of Appeals. So it has been unavailable, then available, then unavailable again or something. So it is currently unavailable in California. But naturally, I would just take the private jet to New York to enjoy some wonderful, swollen duck livers.
Wonderful. But they did a poll recently, and 81% of New York City's population supported the ban.
Yeah, the poors. I mean,
yeah, it was the poors.
Fuck those people.
And I think it really shows the differences between, for one, food culture, between class, but also, the concern for animals. If you go to the wealthier classes, they tend to be the ones who have the interest to continue these industries, whether it's, trophy hunting or eating foie gras or fair
fox hunts.
When California had its fur ban, which you talked about, no one gave a shit because fur's a luxury, and for one, it's also California. But no one's eating foie gras if you're a working class person in New York City. So they're I don't give a shit. This is for rich people.
So, on purely culinary terms, and I will, I'm outing myself as just what an insufferable shit I really am. But I have eaten foie gras, and I think it's quite good, personally.
Eating it in front of me in Vegas.
Eat foie gras in front of the vegan is a hilarious game.
Right after.
Yeah, I think it was maybe veal coated in foie gras.
Wonderful.
Anyway, so point being, quite good. I will happily live without it. And it's certainly not an issue that I think should politically animate anyone. Although, there's an argument that sort of all animal products are cruel on some angle or by some aspect, and foie gras is one of them. I don't think it's actually worse than a lot of others. It looks horrible, and therefore I see why it's an easy one for people to be animated by.
I mean, it's an easy victory for the animal welfare community who wants to make basic reforms. I mean, it's like fur. Like, fur is much easier to prohibit than it is like leather, because leather is a more universal basic good. Like, people who would support the foie gras ban aren't going to support like a regular meat ban, because one impacts them daily and the other doesn't. But even with reform, like, overall, most animal welfare reform is heavily supported by like the majority of the population. Like, almost every single thing, it's always like big interest groups and like Donald Trump's sons who fight against these things.
Well, and people become libertarians.
Yeah,
right? It's just odd how the libertarian streak of the upper classes comes out as soon as there's some sort of actually broadly popular reform, right? That what you said, 81% of New York residents or whatever support this ban, and you'll see 19% of the residents of New York City will suddenly be like Ron Paul style small government people, like this intrusion, And why does my boyfriend have to use a car seat? All those important libertarian political questions.
I will say there were actually, when I was in the community, a pretty large like vegan libertarian group, and I mean, it kind of collided, like they expanded the idea of like their version of liberty to animals, which I mean, I haven't really talked about. And
damn, dialectical, man.
Yeah, totally.
That's some contradictions working themselves out there.
But also, like, a lot of them did support animal reforms. So, I mean, it's
like statists.
Yeah, but like beyond the vegan libertarians, most are like, you can do whatever you want with them. You wanna torture your dog? Well, I won't support that personally, but I don't think we should have a law against it. I was never in that camp.
Yeah, I'm gonna be out torturing ducks till the day I die.
Yeah,
but only to own the libs. That's triggering libs is the only reason I want to do. I'm not gonna eat the duck swollen livers. I'm just gonna.
But is it actually as good as they say it is?
Yeah, so it absolutely is.
It's not like shark fin soup, where it's like bland, disgusting soup that no one cares about, but because of the status symbol, people eat it.
Well, I also, I lived in certain parts of Europe whereby, organ meats are not gross to me. Mm-hmm. So I'd say like I like liver and I like pate and things like that. So foie gras is really just sort of taking that concept and amping it up in the opulence sense. So either, it's fine. We should probably, think about a lot of these practices carefully. But in my glorious full luxury gay space communism utopia, we'll have universal provision of lab grown foie gras.
Wonderful.
That's the plan.
I mean, any rational vegan would be for that as well, because it means no more killing animals.
Oh no, we'll still kill the same number of animals. We'll just do that for fun. For fun, the blood sport. Yeah, we'll do the fox hunting with the foie gras ducks.
Wonderful. Yeah, but speaking of,
no, there's no segue there. Don't do it. I know where you're going with it. Oh no, I've got it. Speaking of birds that get eaten, Turkey, the country.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the best I can do.
That's much better than I was thinking.
Yeah, no, don't. I know where you were going, and don't do it.
So Ihan Omar, she got in a lot of fucking shit this past week, and
I'm part of it. I'm giving her shit.
I gave her shit too on Twitter, but like, I don't think all of it's. I think a lot of it's obviously like inflated.
Oh yeah, so Congress finally
the House.
Oh well, yeah, whatever. I don't know, this wacky system of government you got. Yeah, so some body of Congress got a Armenian genocide recognition bill passed, which this has come up for years. I mean, so the genocide was 1915 to 1923, I think.
1.5 million people murdered.
Yeah, by essentially sort of Turkish.
The Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, well, the remnants of the Ottoman Empire as it collapsed, so decided to genocide some Armenians, and I use that word deliberately.
Yeah.
And since I think probably 1924, people have been trying to have the debate about like recognizing this as a genocide and as a crime against humanity.
Yeah.
And has never successfully come to fruition until now.
No. Yeah, that's why I actually kind of have a very slight sympathy with her argument. I mean, I still reject her. So she voted present. So she didn't vote against the bill, but she didn't vote in support of it. But she did say one of the reasons she voted present is she thought it was being politicized against the country because of the timing. And I don't disagree with that at all. I think the tensions between Turkey's like government and public pressure definitely is a reason why now is the time it's passing, when both parties before have never succeeded in trying to pass such a bill.
It's largely, I mean, if you think of sort of Turkey's strategic importance through the Cold War as a wonderful site in which to park nuclear missile sites and like point them at Russia, right? We've always been very afraid of antagonizing Turkey in any way, and this is a sore point, right? This has always been a sore point. Turkey says these 1.5 million Armenians were sort of ordinary casualties of war, and this has been their sworn position for a long time. There's a split in the international community, I think, around was it a genocide? Should we recognize it as such? And the stakes of that in some sense are largely, I think, about our own humanity. There's not necessarily a lot of teeth to what this would mean.
Yeah.
The government of Turkey that perpetrated this particular, I think the official U.S. position is currently unfortunate series of events.
Yeah, they don't call it a genocide.
Yeah, no, this unfortunate humanitarian crisis. That government is gone. It hasn't existed for a long time, and none of its representatives are still alive and things. So would they be forced to maybe make reparations or something? I mean, we don't have that kind of leverage with the government of Turkey currently anay. So
Turkey's not going to do it.
No.
At least not within the current, not under an Erdogan presidency. Like, Erdogan's an ultra-nationalist and is still targeting ethnic minorities that were persecuted prior. I mean, it wasn't just Armenians. It was also like Greeks and Assyrians, and they also ethnically cleansed Kurds.
Some Kurds, yep.
I mean, those relations are all very bad still.
I think the important part is to separate out saying that Jan Omar maybe shouldn't have voted present is also to not ignore the fact that this has sort of been a neocon talking point for a long time, which I think was sort of some of her objection, right? Was that like, hey, the timing of this is suspicious.
Yeah.
And I think it's always important, right, if you are of the left, to separate out the discussion of like, what is true from a sort of idealized, perspective of justice versus going on to take the next step to say, and therefore we should do something about it. Like, we should not probably impose economic sanctions on Turkey on this basis, and we should probably not invade Turkey or start drone striking them. Like, these would all not be things that anybody who is sincere on this issue is saying.
I mean, at the same time, they voted also for sanctions on Turkey, and she voted against that, which I think is the right decision. I mean, economic sanctions are awful for the populace. Like, that's
It would also be relatively ineffective.
It's very ineffective.
Given Turkey's sort of economic relationships in the region, particularly with Russia, for example, and the effectiveness of U.S. sanctions on Turkey might be limited. We could certainly pull those military bases out. That'd be good.
Stop the military funding. Like, we just did a major weapons deal with Turkey ready for the Kurdish northern Syria invasion.
Yes, that would not disadvantage the Turkish people at all, and I think it would probably advantage them to some degree.
I mean, the idea of this being poorly timed, kind of, you need to look at the general reality of what's going on with international relations, and blaming Turkey when it's already being negatively viewed for righteous reasons, like killing people who are ethnic groups, is wrong and violating the sovereignty of foreign countries. So, I mean, now's the time to pass it. Like, we shouldn't be, like, trying to hide the genocide of a country because we want to maintain good graces. I mean, I think it really hurts her other movement she's really passionate about, which is like BDS in Palestine. Like, all these people who probably voted for it are against BDS. So how is that going to look like? Oh, she's going to vote yes for the group that's like, I don't know, like if the right wing talking point is, oh, it's because they're Muslims.
But that is
case,
the perception. Certainly, is that this is a tribal affiliation.
Yeah. But I think it really wasn't that. Her other part was like, well, we should totally recognize all the genocides, including the indigenous and slaves. And like, sure.
You would have to start somewhere.
It's quite like hyper woke, like quotations, anti-imperialism. Like, it's not real anti-imperialism to do any of this. And also, it's like you're missing the trees for the forest for the trees. Like, these people are still being marginalized, surrounded by countries that hate them.
Well, and you know, thinking about the damage done to the Armenian diaspora.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of, you know, there's more. I can't remember the exact number. There's something like, I think, 3 million Armenians in Armenia.
Yeah.
And like 8 million outside still, many of whom were ejected. And you just have to think about like the horrors visited upon those communities in other countries, including the Kardashians.
Yeah.
You know, just the true tragedies that have, you know, struck this once proud people as they've been forced out of Armenia. And we actually watched the Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown or whatever, with where he goes to Armenia and with hanging out with Serge Tankian from System of a Down. Mm-hmm. And he you know, Southern Californian Armenian, like second generation who sort of returned to Armenia at some point. You know, System of Down good, Kardashians bad.
So I actually will say Kardashians trash family, but for being diaspora of the Armenian community, they actually have been quite outspoken about the Armenian genocide and the lack of recognition in the U.S. Like, I think they actually just recently visited Armenia and like had their babies like baptized in like the Armenian Orthodox Church. So like, I mean, I'll give it to them that like they still seem to like be a talking point for like a group that's the U.S. won't talk about at all, and are quite like wealthy, like powerful family.
Yeah, we certainly use the label of genocide, ethnic cleansing, maybe Holocaust even, right, in ways that are only ever about enacting U.S. foreign policy that pre-exists our interest in those labels. Yeah. So, you know, I think anybody is right to be very suspicious of when particularly the right wing in America gets very excited about labeling something a genocide or ethnic cleansing or anything.
Yeah.
That said, we should be fully conversant with the idea that there are humanitarian horrors that do go on in the world and have gone on in the world. And so I don't think it's hyperbole sometimes to call something a genocide, or particularly where it's like state actors targeting civilians. That's, you know, that is something we will in our glorious socialist, you know, world socialist utopia, we will have to contend with the fact that these kinds of things will still happen.
Yeah.
And clearly the neoconservative view of like, well, we'll just go gallivanting into any country with our giant military apparatus is not the right answer.
No.
But we will have to contend with what do you do? How do you oppose power being sort of asymmetrically wielded against civilians?
Yeah. And I feel like just my last like thought on like the Ilhan Omar vote, I feel like she missed a huge opportunity to co-align the like genocide of Armenians with the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Like, she could have brought that up and kind of pointed out the hypocrisy of this two-party state that just refuses to do anything about the ethnic cleansing and bombardment of Palestinians under the Israeli settler colonial project. But she didn't do that. She just kind of instead made herself like look like a person who doesn't believe the Armenians were genocided. And that just looks really bad, because she's already viewed as like this Muslim, evil, like Sharia law lady who...
She married her brother.
Yeah.
Totally agree that it was a missed opportunity there. And in the same way that there's a lot of people who think they're being very strategic or radical by trying to push, say, Bernie to quote unquote to the left on issues by being like, why hasn't Bernie endorsed prison abolition?
Yeah.
Or why is Bernie not talking about open borders right now?
Yeah.
There is kind of a sense in which I'm not into the uniquely American sport of liking politicians, and therefore I don't require them to not be a little cynical at sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? Like she could have used that for essentially to advance some political aims that I happen to agree with. Or she could have kind of like just chosen not to fight this particular battle and saved that the political capital for some future time when there was some other goal that felt higher stakes. I mean, a historical genocide, the scars of which are still felt, is probably worth addressing, but it's also maybe not the highest stakes things, whether we do or not right now.
And clearly this was like a media blowout. Like, there was 2 Republicans who voted present as well, and I think there was like 11 people that voted no, but it was Ilhan Omar who was the one that was like on the front page of everything, like, Ilhan Omar votes present on this. But it's like, why would you talk about the other people? And it's clear, like, media bias against her.
She's the suspicious foreigner, naturally. We should, but
also
be suspicious of her Americanism.
She supported Bernie, and I saw a lot of articles pointing out her support, as well as Rashida Tlaib's support of Bernie. It's like critique of Bernie. He's like, oh, these anti-Semites are supporting Bernie Sanders, and it's like, no, like, Ilhan Omar goes to like gay prides and like, but like, it's not anti-Semitic to my knowledge.
I mean, well, and perhaps endorsing a Jew.
She endorsed a Jew.
Yeah, but also like keeping in mind that personal anti-Semitism still would not be disqualifying in the political conversation.
Yeah,
I don't believe she is at all, but like if she were, it wouldn't actually matter in the way people think.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly sort of liberal take about what would anti-Semitism mean in this context. It would be if we were to inspect her voting record and find that it was anti-Semitic, that'd be horrible.
Yeah. I mean, the Christian fundamentalists of both parties are far more anti-Semitic in their Zionism. I mean, because it kind of feeds this narrative like, oh, we need to get all the Jews back, and then the Messiah will come and
when the Great War starts, we'll finally have the conditions to bring back Jesus.
It's like, oh, we don't care about the Jews because we care about human rights. We care about it because some book we own tells us that's how we come to the grace of God. Like,
and to be clear, the official Twink Revolution position is we are pro-satanic forces.
Yeah.
We will, when the apocalypse comes, finally triggered by the return of all the Jews to Israel, we will be on the side of Satan. And you can find us on the front lines with the Twink Corps.
Yeah, my bedazzled sickle.
Speaking of apocalypses, there's how you do a segue, Sam. Check that out.
You interrupted me though.
Yeah, no, screw you. It's good. It's
PG&E is still being a complete fucking piece of shit, and the fires are still going on in California, and there's been a lot of talk about nationalizing public power or private power.
Yeah, and I just so I am old enough to remember previous PG&E bankruptcies.
Okay.
And certainly the current ones are Pacific Gas and Electric is this bizarre setup whereby it's a private enterprise. It's actually publicly listed on the stock exchange. It has sort of public shareholders. It is a for-profit power utility. Mm-hmm. But California, in its neoliberal wisdom, decided the excesses of PG&E, the California power generators, was too much, and so they have this thing called the California Public Utilities Commission that sets the prices at which you can sell electricity on the open market and the amount of profit they're allowed to make. It's just the absolute worst of all worlds. So there's a monopoly. It's monopoly supply.
What? And a free market?
Well, no, it's not. That's why it's neoliberal, right? So to the extent that it's not just pure liberalism, in that if we were like, well, the best electricity generator will win, according to the rules of the free market. PG&E has gone bankrupt like I think like 4 times. I can't, so they have just this hideous history.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen the movie Aaron Brockovich, that's a retelling of the story of Hinckley, where in the late 50s, early 60s, PG&E was dumping like thousands of tons of chromium-6 laced water into the groundwater, leaching it into groundwater. And it created this giant plume of pollution that polluted all the groundwater of a town called Hinckley in California. And many deaths, birth defects, childhood cancers, all sorts of stuff happened.
Wonderful.
PG&E did not disclose this environmental disaster until 1987.
Really?
Yeah, and then they were sued. There was a large settlement reached, I believe, through a long court case. So that's that's like just one of the many things they've done.
Yeah.
Then they I think have there's been many wildfires they've caused because they don't maintain their lines.
Yeah.
And this is including only the cases where they were found sort of strictly liable because they had not followed their line maintenance procedures.
They're also not like clearing out like brush and like forestry around these areas, so they're just building up as kindling. Yeah,
as we said, I think last week, they also don't bury their lines because that's expensive.
Yeah,
and they are a for-profit corporation where their profit is capped, so they have to cut costs, right? And this is how the market works. If you're thinking about like, if you're saying you can, I think it's like 10.8% they're allowed to sort of make.
Yeah,
basically. So they want to spend $0 on producing power. And maintaining lines and whatever, and they use all kinds of dirty tricks to do that. In the early 2000s, California was having just massive blackouts.
Yeah,
and it was a bizarre situation. It was they basically the power generators. I think particularly Enron at the time were creating artificial scarcity by shutting down power plants for maintenance at peak times. So that there would be a shortage of demand, and then they, according to the rules of this stupid monopoly system, they can jack up the prices.
Wonderful.
Yeah, isn't that great? So, and then they ended up going bankrupt, I believe.
Good. Kill them all.
Well, no, we bailed them out, of course.
We didn't guillotine them?
No, strangely enough. So, yeah, we had sort of... California had deregulated... its power generation in the mid-90s in the sort of wonderful Clinton era of deregulation.
But they were our saviors.
Yeah, if only. So there's just months and months of like rolling blackouts and all sorts of insane. Just this is a developed nation that cannot keep the lights on, and the richest state of the richest country in the world.
Yeah,
literally cannot keep like medical equipment functioning. And it kills people. These people kill people, and they manipulate markets, and we haven't nationalized them yet. We keep bailing them out. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, just signed on for another bailout.
I fucking hate him.
Yes, he is a giant piece of shit.
All the neo-libs suck.
But he did gay marriage in San Francisco as mayor, so he's great.
Fair guys.
He's great. What are you talking about?
But I know some of our fans like wanted us to talk more about the nationalization, and
hell yeah,
one of them brought up Nebraska, and I also saw one of our friends in the Bay Area share an article about Nebraska, and despite being a red state, is a fully public power system. Like there's no private electricity and power in the whole state. It's actually 121 publicly owned utilities, 10 cooperatives, and 30 public power districts to the whole population and all of the companies. And this was after being used prior to World War II was all public, and then the governors kind of like restricted a lot of it and like privatized parts of it. And then once the guy who did like the Tennessee Valley Authority came to power in the state, he was the one who got it back through full public. So basically everything's for public interest, and despite like right-wing smears and stuff, it'd be like, oh, what about bureaucracy and what about public input? It's actually very like dispersed to allow input. Like they just had people from all over the country, or not country, all over the state, go and give input about expanding renewable resources and even expanding wind power across Nebraska, which is like...
Yeah, so they do sort of elections, local elections for your local power district and stuff. So there's sort of some accountability provided.
It depends on like which district, but like some are like appointed seats, some are just like representatives, some are like public meetings, stuff like that. So
and they pay one of the lowest rates for power in the country.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's sort of a Soviet failed state, right?
Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah, and they're expanding renewable. Like, I feel like that's one of the only ways we're going to have an adequate switch to renewable resources is through making them a public asset. Otherwise, the profit incentive will just never allow us to switch over in time.
Right, and given that so many of these utility networks were essentially constructed using public funds, what you basically see is the privatization model around the world has always been you pass these things into private ownership.
Yeah.
Some shitty, usually kind of right-wing or center-right government gets to spend the windfall, usually on, wars or something.
Yeah.
And then these corporations who have just inherited what would be a functioning utility just run it into the ground and asset strip it. I mean, there's no incentive to keep it running. They are purely playing a game of sort of amortized cost of like, we paid X for it and we can extract some multiple on that over some number of years and then we pack up and go home. It doesn't matter because and the state is left holding the bag on it.
Well, I think it gets better because like what you just said, but in Nebraska, despite the low rates, they still had an excess of like $30 million a year, and all of that money is funded to social services, so like public education, infrastructure. It's like they're paying lower rates than probably most of America, and they're able to use the profit of it to funnel into like public social services. Like that's just mind blowing, and it's also a red state, so everyone's like, these red people are so regressive, and they're like deplorables according to Hillary. It's like they have a fully public energy system. Like it's like North Dakota has the only public banks in like the U.S. Like this idea that working class people in red states don't want public services is just not reality.
But these people might have some unwoke views on race or gender.
They
or
might not know what babies are.
Yeah, we must strip them of these experiments in public ownership until they fall in line. So New Zealand, where I grew up, of course, has done a series of experiments in terms of full sort of welfare state style public ownership of things like trains, the post office, electricity generation, all of that. And then went through a period of sort of Reagan and Thatcher inspired neoliberalization.
So they've got the answer right finally.
Finally, yes, they reached the competitive market, which resulted in exactly what I was talking about, right? It's sort of asset stripping through the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah. Some of it has passed back into state ownership. Some of it has not.
Yeah.
But one model that they use there quite often, and like I have mixed feelings on it, but it is the state-owned enterprise model, where if your concern is like that the government and that we all know in this country particularly, but anywhere, right, is sort of a hideous bureaucratic hellscape. The state-owned enterprise model is basically like, let's have this thing run like a corporation, but the only shareholder is the government.
Oh, so socialism.
I mean, yeah, it's a little gross, and well, I mean, it at least gets towards the spirit of some sort of collective ownership.
I think it's good to point out the difference between that and like kind of the Nebraska model is what you're talking about is state assets being viewed as basically a capitalist function, which is like state capitalism,
right?
Versus genuine socialism, where it's no longer profit-driven industry; it's instead a human-based industry, which Nebraska seems very much like. It could have issues. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Nebraska power, but like, there's a big difference between like running like a corporation, which is not socialism, even if it's...
Right. I mean, a capitalist state is only capable of doing so much, even if it is a sort of a cuddly a cuddly, lovable one like New Zealand's or Canada's or whatever, right? I mean, they are still going to sort of reproduce the structures of capitalism in whatever they do. And so state-owned enterprises might be an okay sort of interstitial step on the way to something better.
I mean, China did it, and
China does it. I mean,
China does it. A lot of Chinese, it's like more state capitalism, and they're having massive growth. I mean, not to say that's the option I'm gonna chant for, but like at least there's some control over how this resource is going to be utilized.
Yeah, and if you can strip the profit motive out of something, you're definitely getting closer to the right solution. Yeah. I think the difference is around what is true sort of decommodification, right? And so many of these things trade as a commodity. We assign a price to them, and we say that price is dictated by the market and the pricing mechanism of the market, and we trade them as a good or a service, and that's a problem in of itself. Yeah. And but to say that, at least saying, okay, we're going to trade them like commodities, but we will remove the profit motive in the short term is a good step. I mean, I'll at least cheer you on if that's your project, but it's not really getting the whole way to thinking about what is certain kinds of local and worker control over these things. What does operating them for the public benefit with planning, not using the price mechanism, not using the market as a price mechanism, using central planning as a price mechanism is a much better idea.
I mean, China shows the failures of the neoliberal project. I mean, I think Chile in their protest is a great example. It's the only country in the world where the whole water system is privatized. Like, even the U.S. isn't fully...
Right, there's a profit motive built into the price of water.
Like, everything was neoliberalized, like your Social Security, your pensions, and turns out it's a fucking shit show, despite what, the Reason writers and,
Milton Friedman. People who jerk off to Milton Friedman.
Yeah. But no, people fucking hate it.
And it can generate short-term prosperity. That's the thing, is that the rebuttal to... what would be our objection to these kinds of reforms is that they, in Chile, did generate short-term prosperity because they sold off the entire infrastructure of the country to, international financial capitalist interests. And what happened was, they that generated a short-term cash boom, but then it all falls to bits because there's no interest in maintaining it.
I mean, socialists don't ignore the fact that capitalism can create massive growth. I mean, even Marx talked about it, but the goal is to move beyond it, like how we moved beyond mercantilism to capitalism. If you think it's going to be forever the system,
I know we're going to return to barter. You can have my 2 foie gras ducks.
We're going to become primitivist, and we're just going to kill everyone.
Well, and with that, I think that's our show. Be sure to stock up on firewood and tree bark for medicine and things like that. We're all looking forward to the primitivist revolution. But please, if you come across a foie gras duck, put it aside. It'll be useful for trade later. Yeah, it'll make a lot of profits. Okay, guys. Well, remember to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TwinkRev, and we also have a Facebook page, Twink Revolution. And until next time, thanks for listening, bitches. Bye.